Let me introduce myself. I am Amanda. I founded Northern Valley Creators 10 years ago, and we very much focus on helping technical leaders and technical experts be as confident managing people as they are facing into those technical challenges. And we use a lot of neuroscience to help people move from creating value through their expertise within an organization to creating that value through the way that they lead. What are we going to cover today? I'm going to go through what actually shapes a good year for leaders. So this is all about how can you make 2026 your best year ever. So I'm going to go through what actually is going to help you have that good year. I'm going to talk about how pressure changes the way that your brain works and your behavior and how that impacts on others. I'm going to give you time and space to recognize what might be impacting on your year. And also, I'm going to give you some really practical things that you can take away and consider for next year. So let's dive into it. And here's your first question to think about. So the whole event is what's going to make 2026 your best year ever. So, all right, then, what is that? How will you know that 2026 is your best year ever? What is it that you are looking for, hoping for? What's your yardstick for awesome? And I would love you to put into chat just a couple of things that for you would be a real measure for making 2026 your best year ever. If you take a minute now to get that really, really clear in your mind, you're more likely to achieve it. So I would love everybody just to think, what is it that's going to make 2026 your best year ever? And that could be about the way that you lead, the way that your team performs. It could be some specific projects that you want to achieve at work, or it could be some things at home, doing that deep tidy and getting everything ordered and structured. Sometimes your best year ever isn't about things, it's about the way you feel and the energy that you bring in. So somebody's put in enjoying everything I do and doing that to my best ability, being more proactive, health. I've got look after my knees as one of my goals for 2026, better work-life balance. So now that you have an idea about what's going to make it your best year ever, I want you to think about, and again, pop this into chat, what would you need to achieve that goal? Is this about more money, more time, more resources, more team members? Is this about a change in thinking? Is this about getting a new boss who's a bit more open and a bit more encouraging? What is it that you feel you need that's going to help you achieve that goal? So we've cast our mind now, haven't we, about what we want for 2026 and what we think we need to achieve that. Got more team members. I think we've got more support around well-being, time to relax, a stronger business plan and strategy, a plan, a mentor, time and discipline. So some of the things that we have written down are things that come externally to us, and some of them are things that come from our internal state. So what I'd love you to do now, I want you to think about what do you like when you're at your best? Because if you want to have your best year ever and achieve the things that you've written down, you need to be coming into that from this energy and space where you're at your best. So at your best, it might be when you're in an environment where you feel supported, where you're with people who you feel trust you, where you're working in flow, which means that the level of challenge that you're facing is kind of just a bit of a stretch above your skill level, where you're doing stuff that you love and brings you joy, maybe where you're working with people who you absolutely adore working with. What do you like? At your best, who are you? What do people experience and see or say about you? In like review meetings when your boss has gone, you've had a cracking year. Yeah, what do you like? What do they say? And when you think about, the end of the day, when you've got that lovely feeling where you've done something and you're really proud of yourself, how did you go about doing that? Oh, someone said they're unstoppable. I love that. We've got relaxed, positive and optimistic, motivating, supportive, empathetic, a machine and on fire. I love that. confident, excited, super optimistic. These are all brilliant words and energies and things. And the reason why you are able to be like that is because you will be in a state where you're able to access your whole brain. So for people who've worked with me before, I talk a lot about brains. And I think that when you understand how your brain works, it helps to demystify behavior and why you are how you are and why others behave the way that they behave. So when you are in a calm state, you are able to access your whole brain, which means that you are able to do things like solve problems, be creative, plan, have all this positive social behavior where people want to work with you. That ability to be happy, energized, focused, excited, optimistic comes because your fight and flight response has not been activated. You are able to access positive memories, positive thoughts, positive feelings, use that self-control and self-regulation and work in a way that makes people want to lean in and work with you. When we are also in this whole brain state, we are able to collaborate, to cooperate, and to create a space and an environment where people lean in and they like us rather than finding us sort of difficult or spiky or hard work. So I'm going to present an argument for you today that your results, having the best year ever, is going to come from how safe people feel with you and how easily, when you're knocked off balance, you can then come back quickly and recover. So when we are in a whole brain state, we are more likable, we like others, we are more trusting, and we are more able to kind of rationalize and reframe. So when things happen, we don't think, oh my goodness, no, I can't believe they've done that. They're doing this to deliberately annoy me. We just take things in our stride and we might have a bit of a wobble and then we'll get kind of back on track and back into that unstoppable, confident, engaged you. So the converse thing, and for anybody who's on here who's not ever come across this handy model of the brain, it comes from a neuroscientist called Dan Siegel. And what he has developed is this really easy way of using your hand a bit like a proxy for your brain. So when you're in this whole brain calm state, it's like a closed fist and you're able to access all parts of your brain. When something triggers you, it irks you, it annoys you, when you've got colleagues who are being difficult, they've got slopey shoulders, they're not doing the work, your boss doesn't seem to support you, the things you're being asked to do are too difficult, your diary's too crammed, when you've got all of these things going on, what happens is that your warning system in your brain gets activated and it senses danger. It senses that you feel uncomfortable or out of your depth or worried about getting things wrong or dropping the ball. And it floods your brain with cortisol. So this system in your brain is super helpful if you've got, I don't know, a car careering towards you and you need to immediately jump out the way, or if there is an immediate threat and danger that you need to physically respond quickly. What your brain is doing is taking all of the blood supply from your brain into your limbs so you can run off. And it's also giving you this narrow laser focus so you can then be really honed in to the danger and the thing that you want to react to so you can keep yourself safe and keep yourself alive. The problem is that our brain is constantly reacting to perceived threat and social threat where this response is unhelpful. It's actually making us less enabled, less empowered, less excited, less easy to work with. Because when we're in this flip state with that narrowed focus, what our brain does is it gets us to react, not reflect. So we're now winging it and responding in the moment with the best that we've got. And quite often, the best that we've got in this flip state is a less intelligent version of us because we drop 13 IQ points. It's a less creative version of us because all of that ability to create, to respond, to think more strategically disappears. We stop listening, we make mistakes, we start making assumptions, and we move into behaviors that are very much about protecting us from danger rather than working in a more socially team-based way. So in this flip state, we are in survival mode. And quite often when I work with clients, they're like, oh, there's like two versions of me, and I don't like who I become, and they feel shame. But this is about biology. Our brain is doing its very best to protect us. And sometimes, for some of my clients, they're protecting themselves from that absolute telling off that they got when they were a teenager by their dad, from the bad boss that they had when they first went into the world of work. And their brain has got very fixated on certain characters, statements, and situations that it perceives as danger, and it moves us into protection mode rather than into a space where we can collaborate and think in a more whole brain state. So the sorts of things that we start doing in this flip state is reaction, protection. Our negativity bias comes in, so we are more suspicious and mistrustful. If you've ever been in a situation where there might be a group of you and one person says something and you think, oh my God, I can't believe they've said that. That's so rude. And nobody else gets that kind of feeling from the conversation. That can be the negativity bias. A lot of organizations I'm working with at the moment where there's been a lot of change, some restructuring, people will automatically assume in that negativity bias state that there's going to be redundancies, that things are going to get worse, that it's going to be really difficult. And they see the awfulness of it rather than the possibility. When we're in this reactive state, our brain is also using all of its shortcuts to make decisions. So that cognitive bias means that we will choose what we've always done, what was most recently done, rather than thinking about what is the best thing to do in this situation, or what is the best way to behave with this individual. And if we go back to the point of today, in order to make 2026 your best year ever, you need to be able to be in your best brain space. And one of the things that I just think is really fascinating is when people are in this reactive state, they can't learn. So that ability to remember, learn, do something different absolutely gets shut down. So people are stuck in these endless loops of repeating patterns of behavior that never move them forwards. So what I want you to do is reflect, think about you, and what are you like when you are triggered, stretched, under pressure, working with people who you think don't value you, doing things where you feel uncomfortable or where it feels really difficult, where you feel exposed, where you're scared of being wrong. You know, what goes on for you when your brain gets flipped and that ability to access your whole brain goes offline? What version of you am I going to see? And I've been doing this work, helping people think about themselves at their best and their worst for about a decade. And I would say that this little list here is a slice of what happens to people when they're at their worst. So what I want you to do is just have a look at the list and just give me a sense of how many of these do you recognize. So it might be, oh, just one, Amanda, or it could be all of them, or it could be half of them. But how many of these do you think, if I'm really honest, when my brain is flipped, when I'm irked, when I'm being irritated by colleagues who are being unsupportive, when I work with that awful boss or with those terrible suppliers, this is what happens for me. So for me personally, when my brain is flipped, I can get a bit flappy. So I tend to make mistakes, talk too fast, get confused, trip myself up. I can be a bit over dramatic. So I tend to exaggerate and make things a lot bigger and worse than they can be. Or sometimes I just withdraw and I get really lethargic and my brain goes really quiet and I just can't think. Quite a few, more than I would like to, most of them, avoidant, shutting down, all of them. So it's really interesting, isn't it, that we've got how we are when we're at our best, when we're accessing our whole brain, and then what happens to us and our behaviors when we are in this state where we're flipped, that cortisol is flooding, and we are not at our best, we are at our worst. And I just want you to think about, what is this telling you now? So your results, how good your 2026 is, depends on how safe people feel with you. And when you think about those behaviors for when we're flipped, particularly if you're somebody that goes into that avoidant, withdrawn, aggressive, muddled. I mean, I can often blurt the most stupid things when I'm really nervous and I just look like a complete buffoon. So how do people feel when they think, oh my goodness me, is this woman Just what a lunatic. Why is she saying that? Why is she doing this? She seems very incompetent. And also think about it as well from the perspective of life is full of challenges. You know, the workplace is full of things that we wish would be better or that we'd like to change. And individuals that we work with are also bringing their best and worst behaviors. And when you're faced with someone else's worst behavior, that again can be really triggering and really confusing. So your results come from how quickly you can get knocked off, notice that your brain is having a bit of a wobble and you've got those worst behaviors coming, and how quickly you bring yourself back into that whole brain state. And this ability to kind of work with your brain, understand your brain, and bring yourself back into that whole state is really, for me, where that success will come from. And all those things that you want to achieve will become more possible for you when you're bringing your best self into each day. To give you something really practical, really useful, and something you can kind of take away. So we're going to focus on about what it is that you can do to help your brain feel calm. Because if we can bring our brain back into that whole brain state, lower that flip lid, and allow ourselves to be more at our best and be more at our best more consistently, we are going to be much more successful in 2026. So when it comes to what helps your brain feel calm, there are a number of things that we need to do. And one of them is emergency action. This is something that I teach clients to do. And we kind of identify a number of things that when somebody says something or somebody does something. So I'm working with a client. Whenever people ask them a question, their first thought is, what have I done wrong? And before they were aware of the fact that this is what was going on for them, it meant that whenever they were asked a question in a room, you know, a room where they're trying to influence, encourage, negotiate, they were using a tone of voice, a body language, and facial expression that basically was discouraging any further conversation and was getting quite combative. So what that person needed was something in the moment to bring themselves back into a whole brain state. So if you would like, we could do something together. Let me just see if I stop sharing so you can see me. So what I'd love you to do, if you want to join in with me, if you don't, that's absolutely fine. Sit with your feet firmly on the ground, because we're often sat, aren't we, in meetings and with people. And if you sit with your feet firmly on the ground and you bring your attention into the soles of your feet, the way that the ground feels underneath your feet, your attention to your toes, and just start to bring a little bit of relaxation from your feet, up your legs, to your bottom, to your back, to your shoulders, to your face. And then just take one slow breath. So we're going to breathe in and then slowly breathe out. And that little thing can just bring yourself back to presence. And you can do that in a meeting. You can do that driving your car. You can do that with your family over Christmas when they drive you mad, because no one can see you doing it. Just bringing your attention to your feet, bringing that relaxation up through your body, rolling your shoulders back and just taking a breath. And if your out breath is slightly longer than your in breath, that tells your brain, I'm relaxed. No need to worry. And what I would also encourage you to do is for you to be experimenters. And I want you to think about, what do you do when something happens and you bring yourself back into presence? And make a little list, because there are lots of things that we all do instinctively. And if you can start to have your little plan that's there up your sleeve, you can bring that out and use that whenever things happen that kind of create that wobble and that disconnect and that discomfort. But you've got that one that I've given you that's really simple, feet on the ground, bringing a wave of relaxation and just that longer out breath when things happen, to just bring you back into presence and stop yourself from reacting in the moment from that kind of flip state where you're not wanting to cooperate, where you're more mistrustful, and where you're going to say things with an energy or a tone or an approach that isn't going to get people working well with you. So then the second thing that I want to share with you that's going to make the world of difference for your 2026. And this, when it was first introduced to me, hadn't occurred to me. So I may be stating the obvious for you, but for me, I found this really, really revelatory, if that's a word. So quite often when people come into coaching, something's happened and they don't feel as resourced and as confident and as comfortable or as happy or have the same level of agency as they used to do. And quite often people blame themselves. You know, there's something wrong with me. Why am I not how I used to be? Am I promoted above my ability level? Have I bitten off too much? Is this the wrong environment for me? Are the people around me too much for me to deal with? And so what was presented to me, and what I think is a really helpful way of thinking about this, is that you become off balance, you become triggered and flipped when the level of challenge you are facing exceeds your level of support. So let me just say that again so your brain can really hear it. If the level of challenge you are facing is more than the level of support you have got, then of course you are going to have a wobble and you're going to feel off balance and you're going to feel overwhelmed and uncomfortable and you're going to get triggered. Now, quite often when we get promoted or when we take on new projects or when we take on new responsibility, we don't think about how can I give myself more support for this? We kind of think, well, I'm doing brilliantly. I'm going to step into this new space and I'm going to bring that brilliance into that new space. But what we haven't done and haven't considered is every step up increases the level of challenge. And therefore, we also need to think about increasing the level of support to match the level of challenge coming into us. So I would love you just to take a moment to consider, what challenge do you think you might face in 2026 and what support might be possible to bring in to help you with that? What was the thing you wanted for 2026? And what specifically about that might be challenging and what support might you need? And then the final piece that I want to put into the puzzle for today is to create your plan for 2026. And quite often when we create a plan, we think about, well, these are the things I want to achieve. This is my goal. This is my measure of success. And we've got all these things that we want ourselves to do. But what I would encourage you to do is to think about, how are you going to create a calmer 2026 for your brain so that you can operate from a space where you're able to access your whole brain? Because in that whole brain state, it's much easier to be empathetic, compassionate, to listen, to find the right path, to know what to do. And sometimes creating that calm 2026 can be about family things, because we are whole beings. And sometimes the stresses that we face come more from our family than from work. Sometimes it's about both work and family. So I want you to think about, what are you going to stop doing or start doing or continue doing to create that calm 2026? So for some people that I've worked with, it's been about their diary. And what they've realized is that the way that they've structured their diary or allow people to put meetings in, it means that they haven't got time to eat, to go outside and see the sunshine, to breathe, to pause, to do the work. And so one of the things that they are stopping is allowing people to stick stuff in their diary, and they're going to start putting in little bits of buffer time. For other people, they've added things like going for a walk and looking at birds. For some people, it's about looking after their bodies and just not eating as much sugar or not drinking as much coffee after 12. We all know ourselves and what we need and what's going to make a difference for us. So what I'd love you to do, for everyone to kind of just think about, what is it that you need that's going to make a difference? Stop trying to do everything for everybody. Start making my needs higher and continue seeing friends more. And there is, it's brilliant, there is something about friendship as well, and that connection that is really good for your brain and really nourishing. So this isn't about adding more things, it's about thinking about what is going to help bring a little bit more calm and bring a little bit more nurture and support. If you know that you're going to be facing some really difficult things, does that mean having gentler mornings? Does that mean finding a friend to talk to? Does that mean getting a mentor? So Steve's putting going to watch comedy at the theatre, and it sounds like, little things, but actually for your brain to know that you're going to do these things regularly that makes you laugh. So it can be something really little and really personal, but something that is going to make a big, big difference to your brain and feel more soothing. Oh, stop overthinking, over planning. Brilliant. Be more spontaneous. Yes. I used to do with my friend Freaky Fridays, which is where we just look in the newspaper, pick the most bizarre thing to go and do. So we were doing something new, something novel, something fun, and something that we would have great stories to tell about afterwards. So what do you need to kind of put in to bring that fun, that lightness, or that calmness into your day? Thank you.